War movies aren't supposed to predict the future, so why did some of them get it terrifyingly right? What if the chaos, tactics, and strategies we see in today's Middle East conflicts were already on screen years earlier? This isn't about explosions, it's about accuracy. 7 films that didn't just entertain, they anticipated real warfare. And by the time you reach the final one, you'll realize this wasn't coincidence. It was a warning we didn't recognize. Lone Survivor, 2013. Small unit ambushes and terrain-based warfare. It starts like a controlled operation, clear objective, clear positioning, predictable movement, and then the terrain takes control. Lone Survivor captures something modern warfare would later prove again and again. Terrain is not just environment, it's strategy. The mountainous regions of Afghanistan aren't just difficult to navigate, they are designed for ambush. High ground offers visibility, cover, and firing advantage all at once. What the film gets disturbingly accurate is how quickly a mission collapses when enemy fighters exploit that terrain. There's no formal battlefield, no defined front lines, just scattered insurgents moving through elevation, striking from angles that are impossible to predict. This reflects a core shift in Middle Eastern warfare. Small, decentralized units using geography instead of firepower to dominate engagements. Communication becomes fragmented. Units lose coordination. Air support struggles with visibility. And suddenly, a trained operation turns into pure survival. That's the detail that feels almost prophetic. Because modern conflicts in Afghanistan and surrounding regions repeatedly show this exact pattern. Ambushes designed not to win quickly, but to disorient, isolate, and exhaust. The enemy doesn't need superiority, they just need positioning. And once the terrain turns against you, there's no clean recovery.
Window!
American Sniper, 2014. Urban sniper warfare and civilian blending. The threat doesn't announce itself. It watches, waits, decides when to act. American Sniper doesn't just portray combat, it reveals a transformation, a shift where war no longer exists on isolated battlefields but merges directly into civilian life. There are no clear front lines here, no visible separation between safety and danger. Cities become the battlefield. What the film captures with unsettling accuracy is how insurgents use urban density as both shield and weapon. Rooftops become sniper nests. Windows become firing points, streets become unpredictable zones where anything can change in seconds. And the most dangerous part? You don't know where it's coming from. Snipers don't stand out. They blend in, move quietly, disappear into the environment until the exact moment they act. That creates a new kind of warfare, one built on uncertainty. Because soldiers aren't just identifying enemies anymore. They're reading behavior, interpreting movement, predicting intent. Every person becomes a question. That's what defines modern urban conflict in regions like Iraq and Syria. Decisions happen instantly, often without complete information. And those decisions carry consequences far beyond the immediate moment. That's where the psychological weight begins. Because when civilians and combatants occupy the same space, there are no clean choices, no perfect responses. Every action risks collateral damage. Every hesitation risks survival. And over time, that pressure builds, not just on strategy, but on judgment. Because in this environment, the enemy isn't always visible. It's hidden inside normal life. And that's what makes it so difficult to fight.
We gotta move! Hey, trust me.
Green Zone, 2010. Misinformation, intelligence failures, and proxy chaos. Not all wars are fought with weapons. Some are fought with information and misinformation. Green Zone exposes a layer of conflict that operates beneath the surface, a battlefield shaped not by bullets, but by data that can't be trusted. And once that foundation breaks, everything built on it begins to collapse. The film presents a war driven by intelligence that is incomplete, manipulated, or entirely incorrect. Units move toward objectives that don't exist. Missions change mid-execution. Plans unravel not because of enemy resistance, but because the information guiding them was flawed from the start, and that creates a deeper level of instability. Because when trust in intelligence disappears, so does confidence in decision-making. This reflects a reality that became increasingly visible in Iraq and other conflict zones, war shaped by fragmented intelligence networks, competing sources, and conflicting narratives. But the film goes further. It shows how local dynamics complicate everything. Militias, informants, and unofficial actors don't operate under a unified command. And they have their own motives, their own alliances, their own agendas that shift depending on circumstance. That creates a layered conflict where identifying friend or enemy becomes increasingly uncertain. And that's the foundation of modern proxy warfare. External powers influence outcomes, but the actual conflict is carried out by local groups, each pursuing different goals under the same chaotic environment. And when intelligence becomes unreliable, every move becomes a risk. Because in this kind of war, the battlefield isn't just physical, it's informational. And once that space is compromised, nothing remains stable.
Target identified!
Black Hawk Down, 2001. Militia swarm tactics and urban overrun. It was supposed to be fast, controlled, predictable, and then the city responded. Black Hawk Down doesn't just depict a mission gone wrong, it reveals how quickly control disappears when warfare shifts from structure to chaos. What begins as a targeted operation transforms into something far more dangerous. A city turning into a battlefield from every direction at once. This is where the film becomes almost predictive. Swarm warfare. Instead of organized formations, militia fighters rely on numbers, speed, and unpredictability. They don't move as a single unit. They fragment, scatter, and reappear, filling streets, rooftops, alleyways. They don't advance in lines. They surround. What the film captures with precision is how this tactic breaks modern military structure. Vehicles become trapped in narrow streets. Communication begins to fracture. Units lose sight of each other. And once isolation begins, coordination collapses. That's the turning point. Because modern armies depend on structure, clear chains of command, synchronized movement, controlled positioning. Swarm tactics remove all of that by overwhelming the system itself. There's no pattern to respond to, only pressure. This exact approach has appeared repeatedly in urban conflicts across Iraq and Syria, where smaller, less equipped forces use density and persistence to neutralize technological advantages. But the most dangerous element isn't the initial contact, it's momentum. Once the swarm builds, it expands, feeding off confusion, pushing from every angle, forcing constant reaction instead of strategy. And that's what makes it so difficult to stop, because by the time you recognize the pattern, you're already inside it. Eerily.
If it wasn't in...
On the ground! I have a weapon!
The Hurt Locker, 2008. IED warfare and psychological combat. You can't see it. That's what makes it effective. The Hurt Locker doesn't rely on large-scale battles or visible enemies. Instead, it focuses on something far more unsettling, a threat that exists everywhere but reveals itself only once it's too late. IED warfare. Improvised explosive devices changed the nature of conflict in the Middle East. They removed the need for direct confrontation and replaced it with something quieter, more unpredictable. Anything can be a weapon, a road, a parked car, a piece of debris that looks completely ordinary. That's what the film understands so clearly. The battlefield is no longer defined by location, it's defined by uncertainty. What makes this tactic so effective isn't just the damage, it's the anticipation. Soldiers don't move freely. Every step becomes a decision. Every object becomes a possibility. And that creates a form of warfare that never pauses. Because the danger isn't in the explosion, it's in the waiting. The film captures this psychological pressure with precision. Time slows down, silence becomes heavy. Even routine actions carry tension. This mirrors real-world conflicts across Iraq and Afghanistan, where IEDs became one of the most widely used tactics. Low cost, easy to deploy, but capable of disrupting entire operations. They don't just destroy. They control movement. They force hesitation. They shape behavior. And over time, that constant pressure begins to affect more than strategy. It affects the mind, because in a war where threats are invisible, there's no clear moment of safety, only brief pauses between risks. And eventually, even those pauses start to feel uncertain.
What happened to the little kid that you... Jesus.
Execute.
All stations.
Zero Dark 30, 2012. Intelligence networks, surveillance, and targeted strikes. This isn't loud warfare. It's precise, controlled, invisible. Zero Dark 30 didn't just depict a mission, it revealed a shift, a transformation in how modern conflict is fought. Instead of large-scale invasions and visible front lines, the film focuses on something far less obvious. Intelligence as the battlefield. Information becomes the primary weapon. What makes the film feel almost predictive is how it shows war unfolding over years, not through constant combat, but through fragments. Interrogations, surveillance footage, intercepted communications, small details that seem disconnected until they aren't, because modern counterterrorism doesn't rely on speed. It relies on accumulation. The film demonstrates how data is gathered, analyzed, reevaluated, and slowly shaped into something actionable. And when that moment comes, the response isn't massive. It's surgical. No large armies, no extended campaigns, just a single high-value target, identified and removed. This includes night raids executed with precision, drone operations conducted from a distance, and covert missions designed to leave minimal trace. The scale shrinks, but the impact remains significant. But beneath that efficiency lies something more complicated. The ethical ambiguity. Because when warfare moves behind screens, when decisions are made through data rather than direct confrontation, the connection between action and consequence becomes harder to see. There's no battlefield to witness, no clear aftermath to process. Just outcomes, and that's where the discomfort begins. Because when war becomes invisible, or it also becomes continuous, and that raises a question the film never answers. If conflict is reduced to targeted actions and silent operations, does it ever truly end?
I'll give you another 100 million for the other kid.
Syriana, 2005. Oil politics, proxy wars, and fragmented power structures. It doesn't look like war. That's why it's the most accurate. Syriana didn't predict a battle. It predicted a system, a structure where conflict isn't defined by explosions or front lines, but by influence, pressure, and control. The film presents a Middle East shaped not by one war, but by multiple overlapping agendas operating at the same time. Governments, corporations, intelligence agencies, local militias, all moving in parallel, all pursuing different outcomes. Yet there is no single narrative, just competing interests. What makes Syriana feel disturbingly accurate is how it shows power being exercised indirectly. Decisions aren't always implemented by those who make them. Instead, they move through layers, funding channels, political agreements, covert operations, and at the center of it all, resources, oil, infrastructure, strategic positioning. The film reveals how control over these elements shapes alliances, influences leadership, and drives conflict without ever appearing as open war. Because modern geopolitics in the region doesn't rely on direct confrontation, it relies on proxies, groups that are funded, equipped, and influenced from a distance, carrying out objectives that serve larger interests. And those groups don't operate in isolation. Their loyalties shift, their goals evolve, which creates a system that is constantly moving but never resolving. That's the key insight. Instability isn't accidental. It's maintained, because stability would require alignment, and alignment would limit influence. So instead, the system sustains itself through controlled imbalance, and that's what makes it unsettling. There are no clear sides, no defined victories, just ongoing movement within a structure designed to continue. And once that system is in place, it doesn't end, it adapts. They weren't just telling stories, they were showing patterns before most people recognized them. And now those same tactics define real-world conflict. So the question isn't how these films got it right, it's why we didn't see it sooner. Because once fiction starts reflecting reality this closely, it stops being entertainment and starts becoming a warning.
Assetless shell companies.